around the nation. TYT Nation, Jeff Walder here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday, very important day. Impeachment has started, so I've got a story on that one, and I'm not going to give anything away on that, but I've got some opinions. Of course, that's why you tune in to hear those opinions. I know, right? And of course, to give your own, which I strongly recommend in using the super chat. Not only does it help the show, but it also gets your opinion read on here, even if it disagrees with me, which is always fun because I'm always up for a discussion. But I also read other opinions. So hello to everybody in the YouTube chat. That's the only one that I can see right now. Okay, anyway. So I want to thank you guys for being here. Again, it's going to be a pretty big show. We have Midnight Mitch. That's fun. Donald Trump versus teleprompters. That's, again, always fun. And then we've got Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I know. Like, as soon as I said the word Hillary Clinton, I can already hear a groan from the audience. Like, oh, God, no. Why? Why is she? Well, she's back in the news. And she said some things about Bernie Sanders. Oh, boy. So we're going to talk about that. Of course we are. And then we're going to talk about the response. Good times. So, and how this might have actually backfired on Hillary Clinton and helped Bernie Sanders. I love it. This is great. So it's going to be a good show today. We'll have some fun. There will, of course, be a lot of fun at Donald Trump's expense. And we'll be talking about the primaries. So fun times, as always. Please like and share the stream. That goes to, that helps out greatly. And let's get to the news. All right. All right. Earlier today, the Republican-led Senate released their rules for the impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump. Now, the impeachment trial is going on as we speak. It started earlier today at about 1 p.m. And the rules, well, let's just say the rules are stacked in favor of a certain someone, right? Now, those rules McConnell introduced the night before the trial allots each side a total of 24 hours. So it's spaced across 2 days to present their arguments. Now, there are some people who might think, oh, good. That means the senators that are right now off the campaign trail in Iowa would be able to get back to Iowa to finish campaigning. Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders, and Senator Amy Klobuchar can immediately get back to the campaign trail. So that's one positive impact of this. However, there's also some negative impacts, as I said earlier. Now, according to the rules, the time must be confined to 2 working days and stipulates that none of the evidence collected as part of the House's impeachment inquiry will be automatically admitted. So what evidence there is has to be voted in. So any documentation has to be voted in by the Senate. Right now, of course, Republicans have a majority in the Senate. And so any documents would require Republican support, and we don't know. Documents and witnesses, by the way, would require having Republican support. So, okay, right. Now, obviously, since the impeachment trial arguments have started already at 1 p.m. Eastern, they will go until 1 a.m. Eastern the following day. If the members take any breaks, like lunch breaks, bathroom breaks, dinner breaks, Twitter breaks, or F-off breaks, whatever kind of break, right? Well, then the proceedings could well go early into the morning hours. You're looking maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m., et cetera, right? Now, there's a purpose for that as well. If you make something very late night, people are not going to watch it. So now witnesses, like I said, will be allowed only if the Senate votes on them. So, and I'll get into detail about that. But basically what you have is no or very few witnesses, no evidence, and a trial set for when no one will watch it. Sounds totally legit. No, of course it's not. But there's more details here. Under the resolution, House impeachment managers prosecuting the case against Trump would deliver arguments first, right? Setting up the defense to refute them afterwards. Now, that's interesting because after the defense it makes their case, the people that are prosecuting cannot come back and offer rebuttals to that. So basically, the defense is going to have the last word, which could likely be helpful to the president's case. So interesting. Now, the House impeachment managers prosecuting the case would be able to, as I said, deliver their arguments first, with the challenge of compressing weeks of testimony and hundreds of pages of evidence into 24 hours over the course of 2 Senate days. Once the prosecution's time's up, Trump's defense team will take over. After both sides are presented, senators will then have an opportunity to ask questions in writing for a period of up to 16 hours. Once that concludes, the Senate will consider the question of whether it shall be in order to consider and debate under the impeachment rules any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents. The Senate would vote on that. Democrats, of course, need the support of 4 Senate Republicans to make it to that stage. We don't know if they will get that support. If witnesses and documents do end up being approved, the witnesses must first be deposed in secret, and the Senate shall decide after deposition which witnesses will be allowed to testify. Now, that testimony, again, will happen behind closed doors. Well, now, wait a minute. Republicans made a big, I guess a big to-do about nothing, right? When it comes to transparency, when it comes to the Democrats. Oh, House impeachment. Not enough transparency. What's going on? Why are you interviewing people behind closed doors? Well, their own rules will have senators interviewing possible witnesses behind closed doors. What happened to the process? Look, it's pretty clear Mitch McConnell wants this over as soon as possible, right? Like 2 days, gone, right? With as few witnesses and as evidence as they can get away with. The game is rigged, folks. The outcome is inevitable. Still, social media decided to go after McConnell, and they nicknamed him Midnight Mitch, which is always fun. Tony Stark 2020 says, Midnight Mitch said he was going to deliver a rigged trial. He's rigging it to a farce, trying to extract personal political gain against a political opponent by holding back military aid from an ally country is flat out wrong. The GOP will lose on this issue. I actually don't think so. Yes, on the issue, what they did, 100%. Of course, you're not supposed to do that, right? But the Republicans will continue to cover for them, cover for Donald Trump, because basically it's a cult. It's a cult mentality, right? More. Rabbi Jill Zimmerman says, this is not okay. The American people deserve to hear witnesses, see documents, and to not have to hear the trial at midnight. Stephanie Kennedy says, we're looking at Midnight Mitch and the so-called world's greatest deliberative body, really embracing a cover-up that is there for all to see. Let's see. Miss Aderhold says, hey, Midnight Mitch, having a trial in the middle of the night and not allowing C-SPAN cameras to cover it is a massive middle finger to every American. You corrupt B-word. Let's see. Travis Bone says, well, Senate Majority Leader, you've got Moscow Mitch and Midnight Mitch to trend. Do you know how pathetic you sound? And look, with these rules, you seem scared. Because, look, there's no defense on this, right? And that's the problem. The Republicans know that this is indefensible. If it were a Democratic president that had done the exact same thing, Republicans would have no problem impeaching. In fact, Republicans have had no problem impeaching before when it came to a consensual sexual affair. So, and that's something that, look, most people didn't really care all that much about. And let's be honest, but Republicans says, oh, no, we care a lot about this. But in reality, what they did care about was trying to remove the sitting president. Now, the only reason they didn't try that with President Obama is first, look, and you could have gone after him for the drone strikes, right? Drone warfare, etc., right? Well, they decided not to, which is something I actually would, as a progressive, I actually would have supported that. Because when you escalate the drone wars in the Middle East, well, it's a big problem. When you have extrajudicial killings like Anwar al-Awlaki, right? That's a problem. Republicans, but they love that stuff. They absolutely love that stuff. And so they would never impeach a Democratic president over that. Well, get a blowjob in the Oval Office. Well, yeah, we're going to impeach you immediately. It's ridiculous, right? All right. So now, Kara says, I guess the dead of night is the only time Giuliani can move around without catching fire. That's awesome. I love it. By the way, live comments here. Sarchek says, Republicans want to hide the trial in plain sight. No, that's a good point. Damn good point. All right. Let's see. Lawrence Tribe said, these aren't rules for a real trial at all, much less a fair one. They're rules for a rigged outcome, with Midnight Mitch making sure that as much of the so-called trial as possible takes place in the dark of night. Agreed. Midnight Mitch, SDC, says, is a Trump sycophant and a danger to our democracy. There's zero chance for a fair trial. How does anyone abandon their honor, principle, and patriotism for someone like Trump? Only the feckless GOP knows the answer. And of course, their answer is, look, the answer is they're a cult, right? Trump supporters, the voters, are a cult. The Republican congressmen know this, and they know that their job literally depends on defending Donald Trump. And that's it. They defend Donald Trump, they defend their jobs. And so they are such cowards. Mitt Romney just came out and said, oh, no, I support these Senate rules. Yeah, no, not a problem. Well, what happened, Pierre Delecto? What happened to standing up to Donald Trump? What happened to a fair process? It's not at all a fair process. And we know that. We know that for a fact. A fact. All right. And finally, anyone but him, that's clever, says the general public of the United States of America should have a right to hear any and all evidence and see any and all documents to make an honest and fair decision regarding the continuance or the removal of our president. And look, that is the way things are supposed to work. There's supposed to be a fair process. Look, Democrats have bent over backwards to try to, prove to the Republicans that it's a fair process. But see, that's assuming Republicans are actually rational actors, right? And that they will actually are acting in good faith. The Republicans are not. They are not acting in good faith. And so Democrats, you got to get it through their head. These are bad faith actors that no matter what you do to appease them, it will not work. That's why you must fight them. Unfortunately, Democrats never got that memo. Because even in impeachment, they messed up. And so the result that I see is the Republican Party, the Senate Republicans, literally acquitting Donald Trump. And then quickly moving on from impeachment, of course, until, of course, the general election, when they will use it against the eventual Democratic nominee. The Republicans, they seem to have outplayed the Democrats politically. And that's a disaster when you think about it. Now, maybe one day this will backfire on the Republican Party, but I don't think it'll be today. All right. Anyway. Pierre Delecto. Peter S. says Mitt Romney's Twitter handle, Pierre Delecto, is an anagram for erectile doper. Oh my God. Let's not go there. Disastrous. All right. Moving on here. Words are hard. President Donald Trump was visiting Davos and had a little bit of trouble with his teleprompter. Take a look.
In France, another century-long project continues to hold such a grip on our hearts and our souls that even 800 years after its construction, when the Cathedral of Notre Dame was engulfed in flames last year, such a sad sight to watch, unbelievable sight, especially for those of us that considered it one of the great monuments and representing so many different things. The whole world grieved. Through her sanctuary now stands scorched and charred, and a sight that's hard to believe. When you got used to it, to look at it now, hard to believe. But we know that Notre Dame will be restored magnificently.
Through her sanctuary now stands scorched and charred. Very stable genius. He knows words. He knows the best words, the greatest words. Look, I understand. I'm being a bit nitpicky here, right? But it's just so it's so like the weird pauses. I mean, look, they make me think that maybe the font on the teleprompter is too big and it only fits like a couple of words in there at a time. So he'll like read, he's reading the teleprompter because there's only so many words that can fit at a time, right? On the teleprompter. And so he's reading it like, anyway, okay. So he pauses in what's supposed to be one sentence. It's weird. And I just did that pause myself. So, all right. Now, the ad libs are also great. Unbelievable sight. We're going to rebuild it magnificently. Okay. Look, here's the thing. He's at Davos and he's doing this speech. And I think in the same speech, he also goes after Greta Thunberg, right? Warning about the people who are warning about the climate change. Okay, right. So you're going to go after them, but also we're going to talk about the cathedral thing. I don't really care about, and I suspect he also doesn't really care about this. I think this is Stephen Miller. Now, why would Stephen Miller write a speech for Trump to put in the teleprompter to talk about Notre Dame? Well, I think it's because the whole European heritage thing. He seems to care a lot about that because he's a white supremacist, or I'm sorry, white nationalist, right? But as far as Donald Trump, you could tell through that whole thing that while he was struggling and squinting and mispronouncing things, he was also very dispassionate. He did not care at all what he's talking about. And look, if you look at his speeches when he is in front of a crowd, when he's basically freeballing it, right? No, he's animated. Yes, he's saying a bunch of drivel. It's literal verbal diarrhea. But at least he's passionate about it. At least he's having fun, right? But this, not having any fun, not interested at all. He's like, why do I care about this Notre Dame thing? I don't care. No, I'd rather be talking about how crooked Hillary is terrible still, and how crooked Obama is bad, and how great I am, and how terrible water pressure is, that you have to flush the toilet 10 to 15 times in order to get water to come out. And by the way, that's big water, and it is wetter than it is wet compared to the standpoint of water. And again, ridiculous stuff, right? That he's talking about. There's such a big gush of water. When you hit the button, it's a big gush of water. And then 5 minutes later, the dishwasher's done. No, he's never operated the dishwasher in his life. We know that. But again, the proof, when you play that side by side, you can tell he doesn't give a crap. Now, the reason that I mentioned Thunberg earlier and to kind of bring this all around into context, is that he's talking about Notre Dame, right, being on fire, uh, while Australia had been on fire for like a month. Nobody gave a crap. Donald Trump didn't give a crap. Church burns down, and suddenly, like, oh my God, we must do something. You know how many millionaires, billionaires donated to restore the church? A lot. They donated a lot of money. Now, was there a lot of people that donated to, fire relief in Australia? Well, yeah, there were quite a few, right? Not a lot of billionaires donated to it, but there was an Instagram model, I believe, that actually raised quite a bit of money from selling new pictures. That she donated all that money to Australia. That woman is a hero. Literally using her body to save the planet. I love it. But it's pretty ridiculous. Now, going back to how Trump basically can't read, this isn't the first story that we've seen about that. In fact, this is another story in a long line of stories showing how President Trump struggles to read what's in front of him. Whether it be reading the Constitution, there's a story I did, I think, last week on that, where he was struggling to read the Constitution. And I forget the context in which he was reading the Constitution. I think it was an HBO documentary. It was a docuseries where you had a bunch of different presidents, all the living, obviously the current living presidents, reading passages from the Constitution. When it was Donald Trump's turn, he kept struggling and saying, it's like a foreign language. I can't read it. And then started blaming everybody else in the room. He also doesn't want to read briefings. And a lot of his staffers had anonymously, of course, come out to the meeting and said, look, this guy's an idiot. He won't read the briefings. So what we've tried to do is try to condense him into tweet-like segments. And he still has a hard time reading them. We pepper his name all the way through these documents and then put in killer maps and graphics so that he will be interested enough to read. And then there was that, I think, July 2017 meeting where Rex Tillerson said he was an effing moron. This is when he went off on all the generals. He was trying to sit through a briefing where they were trying to tell him about foreign policy, right? Trying to teach him about foreign policy. He went off on Jim Mattis. He went off on Tillerson, basically everybody in the room, because he was bored and didn't want to sit around and read the briefing or even learn what they're trying to teach him. This guy has no intellectual curiosity whatsoever. He's a moron and obviously seems to have a hard time reading. This is our very stable genius. We got to get this guy out. Like I said, man, disastrous. Disastrous. So let's get to something a little bit more serious, right? Okay. So one of the arguments we continue to hear about single-payer healthcare is how expensive it is and how it's going to bankrupt the country. It's going to add an extra $30 trillion over 10 years onto the deficit. And we just can't afford it, right? So now, here's the thing. In reality, our current healthcare system is incredibly unaffordable. Now, how can I make that distinction? What proof do I have? Well, we can just look to our northern neighbors, Canada. Now, according to a new study that had just come out earlier this month, Canada actually spends 4 times less than we do per capita on healthcare for every Canadian. So now, administrative healthcare workers, they said, and health insurance employees who play no direct role in providing patient healthcare actually end up costing every American man, woman, and child an average of about $2,500 per year. That same thing in Canada, the cost of administering healthcare is only about $551 per person. That's about a quarter as much. So, healthcare in Canada, far cheaper to administer than here in the United States. So, now this study was published a couple of weeks ago in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And basically, it challenges the assumptions about the efficiency of public and private healthcare programs. So now, right now, we've got a mishmash of private and public healthcare. For example, we've got Medicaid, which is a public system, which is means tested. But also, by the way, the Medicaid program also has a private component as they contract out to private contractors to be able to expend that insurance to people. Or to administrate that insurance to people. You also have, for example, just straight up private insurance. And you also have straight up government insurance through the VA, right? And so all of that together and the various subsidies and private options or private, plans, the supplementary plans that go along with it, well, they end up costing us a lot more money than if we were to just go to a pure government insurance system. And so that's hugely problematic here in the country. And that's why, of course, you have Bernie Sanders out there, who's the only candidate. And I know some people say, well, Elizabeth Warren says she's in favor of Medicare for all. I don't exactly believe it because her plans have kind of shown me otherwise. Releasing her healthcare plan and her transition plan, which calls for two different pieces of legislation. You have the one, which basically creates a public option, which is not at all like single payer. So I don't know how she can make the argument that, oh no, this is to get Americans used to a single payer system. Then they can just opt over. Well, I'm sorry, but under a public option, you would still have premiums, deductibles, and copays, right? Depending on how the system, you might just have premiums, which is not a single payer system because there are no premiums in single payer. And there are no, deductibles and there's no out-of-pocket cost at the point of service. And so that's very important. That is a big distinction between a public option and a true single payer government insurance plan. All right. So now, like I said, Elizabeth Warren's plan calls for the transition in her third year in office when she's running for re-election after she spends all of her political capital trying to get a public option. So again, I don't see her path as realistic. Certainly less realistic than making one all-out push for Medicare for all and getting it done, spending all that political capital and fighting that fight. All right. So anyway, now what's important to note about single payer in Canada, right? They've had it since the 60s. So they've had this for a very long time. And so they know how the system works. Now, in the system, Canadians don't get healthcare bills. They don't fear losing healthcare coverage if they change jobs or get fired or their employers change plans, or if they make too much to qualify for Medicaid, or if they can't afford their insurance, private insurance premiums. Maybe their Obamacare subsidy didn't come through, or maybe they make too much for it or too little for it or whatever. You're like, because there are people that are in the situation where they make too much for Medicaid, but not enough for the subsidy, which is very strange. A strange place to be. So there's that situation, right? None of those situations happen in Canada. And so I just want to point that out. Their system is so different than ours. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no problems with a single payer system, as we're going to see from attack ads. But those ads are generally overstating the issues. Yes, there are, waiting times for specialist care and some diagnostic imaging, like you want to get an x-ray in your leg. Well, that might take a little bit longer to schedule an x-ray. At the same time, we all know that happens here too. It's not as if like, oh no, if you have the money, then you call your doctor and you can get an image scheduled for like tomorrow at noon. No, that's not what happens. generally, and at least in my experience, generally that tends to take, if I wanted to see my doctor and I call them up and set up an appointment, it's usually a good 2 to 3 weeks, possibly a month later that I can see my doctor. That's have insurance, have the money. That's crazy. That is a long waiting time. And more so, again, if you want to see a specialist here in the United States, it can take upwards to 6 months. And that's without a single payer healthcare system. And so there is that issue that exists in our healthcare as well. And so, look, we also have supplementary plans. Canada also has supplementary plans because Canada doesn't cover things like dental or vision as well. Well, I'm not sure about vision, let's be honest, but certainly they don't cover dental. And so there's that issue as well. And there's outpatient medications that are not included in the government plan. But aside from that, most of the things are covered by the Canadian healthcare system. Bernie Sanders' plan would actually be more comprehensive than the Canadian plan. It would actually be better. In fact, there's a lot of Republicans, Democrats, Freudian slip there. There's a lot of Democrats who are against single payer who admit, I believe it was Michael Bennett, who said, oh no, single payer would be the Cadillac plan. Vision, dental, reproductive services, a lot of extra stuff is put into Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan because its aim is to be as comprehensive as possible and to not need any sort of supplementary health care or health insurance. It would eliminate the need for health insurance companies. And so that's really important. So now, the cost of administering this healthcare system amounts to just about 17% of Canada's national expenditures on health. So you actually have very low administrative costs. However, it's certainly lower than private health insurance. Now, in America, Medicare is actually lower than that. Just to administer Medicare, it is very efficient. So now, in the United States, however, taken all together, it costs about 34%. It costs twice as much. 34% goes to salaries, marketing budgets, computers of healthcare administrators in hospitals, nursing homes, and private practices. It also goes to executive pay packages, which for 5 major healthcare insurers reach close to about $20 million or more per year, and it goes to rising profits demanded by shareholders. So that's just the administration. So there is a problem. And Meadow Bailey says, we do cover dental now. So, and that's in Canada. Wasn't entirely sure, but thank you for that clarification. Now, administering the network of public and private healthcare costs is an estimated $812 billion per year in the United States. And in 2018, 27.9 million Americans still had no health insurance. They were uninsured because mainly cost. And so that's, again, a huge problem. Now, according to the study authors, the U.S.-Canada disparity in administration is clearly large and growing. And they said discussions of health reform in the United States should consider whether $812 billion devoted annually to health insurance administration is money well spent. Well, it appears to not be, because again, it's going, as they point out, into shareholder profits and advertising budgets. That doesn't go to your health care. That doesn't take care of anything that you need. These are people completely unrelated to your healthcare needs that are getting your money and that are getting taxpayer money. And so that is a huge, huge problem. So now they base these costs, in case you're wondering, on an analysis of public documents filed by insurance companies, hospitals, nursing homes, home care and hospice agencies, physicians' offices. Researchers from Hunter College, Harvard Medical School, and the University of Ottawa compared those to administrative costs across the Canadian healthcare sector as detailed by the Canadian Institute for Health Information and a trade association that represents Canada's private insurers. I bet, too, that the information on Canada was probably a lot easier to get instead of having to hunt down, of course, all these different other sources in order to get your data. You just have the health insurance companies in Canada, which are a smaller sector, and then the Canadian Institute for Health. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, the last time they did this comparison, by the way, was back in 1999. Now, they note that the costs of administering healthcare insurance have grown in both countries, which again makes sense. You look at inflation, but they note that the increase has been much steeper in the United States, where a growing number, they say, of public insurance programs have increased their reliance on commercial insurers to manage government programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. And so that's what I was talking about earlier with Medicare, Medicaid specifically, contracting out to actual private insurance companies to administer their plans. And we see it here in Michigan. Now, as a result, they say, expectedly, that overhead charges by private insurers had surged more than any other category of expenditure. Again, we're not shocked about this. We shouldn't be surprised, right? Now, when you compare it to the states, and again, not every state contracts their Medicaid out to private companies to administer that healthcare or that health insurance, but in states that have retained full control over their Medicaid programs, again, no surprise, the growth of administrative costs was negligible. And of course, when you compare it to Canada, the same can be said about the Canadian system. There was basically no growth or very, very little growth in healthcare expenditures for administration. Because, of course, right? In states that shifted their Medicaid recipients into private managed administration, or I'm sorry, managed care, administrative costs were twice as high. So there's a lot of waste in our system right now. So, and that is because you have a private profit motive. Now, the study's authors said that if we wanted to fix that, we could trim the administrative bloat to bring it in line with Canada's healthcare. And if we did that, we could save $628 billion a year for the same healthcare. In fact, they said the United States is currently wasting at least $600 billion on healthcare paperwork, money that could be saved by going towards a simple Medicare for all system. Now, this is according to senior author Dr. Stephanie Woolhandler, right? Now, that sum, she said, would be more than enough to extend coverage to the nation's uninsured. And we don't do that because the for-profit insurance companies lobby our politicians. And so not only do they lobby politicians like Pete Buttigieg, who wants to keep the system the same and has gotten a lot of money from healthcare companies, but they also lobby people like Joe Biden. And they give them a lot of money. And they gave Obama a lot of money to not make any major changes to our healthcare system. And so this is what we're facing. We're facing a corrupt establishment that gets money from private special interests so that we as citizens can either not be able to afford insurance or spend 4 times as much as the closest country to us with single payer. No. We've got to fight against the special interests, and we have to enact single payer now. And the only way that we're going to get there is if we nominate and elect Senator Bernie Sanders to be president. Okay. All right. You know what? I'm going to take a really, really quick break here. We'll come back. We'll thank some patrons, channel members, and then we'll dive right into the rest of the stories here. You're not going to want to miss the Hillary Clinton story. All right. Stay right here. We'll be right back. Around the Nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. Around the nation right here, 218 Nation. Okay, so I want to, for one, thank some channel members. So I want to thank Old Major and Mona Hayford. So those are channel members. You can hit the join button below to become a channel member and help the show. Another way to help the show is patreon.com/218nation. I want to thank Alan Johnson. And let's go down here to hold. Somebody that I haven't called up before as supporting the show, George Torres. So thank you. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's you can support independent progressive media. Okay, now, if there's any super chats, there's none. Let's dive in. So we're running low on time. All right. I think Hillary Clinton just gave Bernie Sanders the best endorsement. Now, look, being a little facetious here, but let me get to the story. So now Clinton, of course, is back, and she's talked about Bernie Sanders. That is her, of course, former 2016 rival, and who is basically angling for front runner. Look, you can argue that he is a front runner against Joe Biden. You can argue that he's tied for front runner. Look, either way, Bernie Sanders, he's coming behind Biden, and there's a very good chance that he's going to overtake Biden, especially if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire. So now, before it was a couple of weeks before Iowa now, she comes out and she says in an interview with the Hollywood Reporter that was released today that she would not commit to endorse or support Senator Bernie Sanders if he wins the Democratic nomination. So now that's important, right? So now here's Hillary Clinton saying that, you know what? I am not planning to support or endorse Bernie Sanders. I'm not going to support the Democratic nominee. Fascinating. So now she also said in a Hulu documentary that, quote, nobody likes Bernie. Nobody wants to work with him. He's got nothing done. He's a career politician. It's all just baloney, and I feel so bad that people got sucked into it. Now, look, this is somebody who, by the way, literally ran a campaign about herself. Remember, her slogan was, I'm with her. Well, why am I with you? Aren't you supposed to be with us? Isn't the campaign, isn't it the president supposed to have the interests of the American people in their mind? It's not supposed to be the opposite. We're not supposed to help you become president to become to fulfill a dream of yours, right? I'm not saying don't dream to become president, but the whole reason you want to become president should be that you can help the people. Now, that's Bernie Sanders' message when he says, not me, us, right? That's his literal slogan, okay? But all right, so according to Hillary Clinton, nobody likes Bernie Sanders, except, of course, that he's the most popular politician in the country, and there's a million polls to back that up. Now, Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, she's actually one of the least popular politicians in the country. Her favorability stands around about the mid-30s, about 36%, right? Donald Trump has a favorability rating of over 40%. That would mean that Hillary Clinton is less popular than Donald Trump. Donald Trump is currently, look, Donald Trump's been underwater, unless, of course, you count Rasmussen polls on their own, right? Which a lot of people do, wrongly. When it comes to aggregate of favorability ratings, Donald Trump's been underwater his entire term. Hillary Clinton somehow manages to be less popular than she is. That does not seem to help her case, right? But no, here's the thing. When she says, nobody likes Bernie, she doesn't mean the people because she's objectively wrong. No, what she means is the people who matter, right? And that would be, of course, people inside of Washington, which she would be correct. Nobody in Washington seems to like Bernie Sanders. Why? It's because he's an outsider. He ain't part of the club. He's not a member of the cocktail circuit. He's never been to a wine cave. In fact, he seems to be against all of those things. He's against what those very people who are in the wine caves are about, which is unchecked power and privilege over our political system. Hillary Clinton loves or loved giving privilege to the donors, to the people who fund the party, to the bundlers, to the establishment, right? Bernie Sanders does not. So the fact that no one in the Washington old guard, in the establishment, in the elite, likes Bernie Sanders, well, do you think that's going to really play against him when he's trying to get the votes of the people? If she believes that, she's dumber than I thought. So out of touch, so incredibly clueless. As for getting things done, well, he has actually gotten things done, both in and out of Congress. For example, he helped Amazon raise their minimum wage, helped striking workers get better pay and wages. He's walked the picket lines. He's shifted the conversation nationally on healthcare, living wage, free college, helped progressive firebrands like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez get elected. And in Congress, he was described by the Almanac of American Politics as, quote, a practical and successful legislator. Unless, of course, you think the Almanac of American Politics is somehow fake news, right? Now, in the House, he was also dubbed the Amendment King for passing more roll call amendments than any other member of the House. He accomplishes this, according to Matt Taibbi, on the one hand by being relentlessly active, and on the other hand by using his status as an independent to form left-right coalitions. This is something that he was uniquely able to do. And according to Humberto Sanchez, writing from Congressional Quarterly, as the Veterans Committee chairman, Sanders was able to, quote, bridge Washington's toxic partisan divide and cut one of the most significant deals in years. That's, of course, deals to help veterans with the late Senator John McCain. And so he has gotten things done. But, of course, when you look at the sheer number of things that, of bills that he has passed or co-sponsored that have actually become legislation, it is pretty low, right? And so, of course, Hillary Clinton supporters were like, look, see, he's never gotten anything done. But wait a minute. Passing a bunch of crappy legislation in order to pad your numbers is not the sign of an effective legislator. We can see it for what it is. It's just padding your numbers. Look, I got all these things done. Well, what'd you get done? Deregulation, tax incentives for businesses. Yeah, but what have you done for the people? Well, it doesn't seem you've done anything for the people. So again, pushing for and passing good legislation and getting good amendments passed in a bipartisan way, that actually is the mark of a good legislator. And that's exactly what Bernie Sanders is. Remember, the Senate, just Congress in general, is an incredibly deliberative body. It is not meant, it's not like a parliamentary system. And I think that's what a lot of Americans misunderstand. It's not meant for a ton of legislation to get passed. It is meant to be slow. It is meant to take a long time. And so if you're criticizing someone for not getting a lot of things passed, especially through a body that happens to be more hostile to outsiders than insiders who do want to pad their numbers with BS, no pun intended, or legislation that seems to help the business community more than anything in a corrupt system. Well, I mean, that's a bad example. A bad example. There's also, as people in the chat point out, the Yemen bill with Mike Lee. Yes, it's a very good example. Also working with Matt Gaetz, Bernie Sanders did, to try to limit Donald Trump's Iran war powers. And so that is stuff that Bernie Sanders can not only reach across the aisle to do and has the ability to do, but also he's able to get a lot more done because He believes in passing good legislation that helps people and ginning up popular support for that legislation. And that's really what we're counting on when it comes to any kind of healthcare reform or student debt cancellation or a living wage. Is getting people to put public pressure on other politicians, and then having Sanders be able to reach out using his outsider status to be able to say, I can get this bipartisan decision. I can get this bipartisan stuff done. Again, a practical, pragmatic, excellent lawmaker and deal maker. That's Bernie Sanders. Now, here's the other thing, right? Hillary Clinton, again, she says this is all baloney, right? And has decided to refuse to support Bernie Sanders if he becomes the Democratic nominee. In fact, here's her quote on that. Quote, I'm not going to go there yet. We're still in a very vigorous primary season. I will say, however, that it's not only him, it's the culture around him, it's his leadership team, it's his prominent supporters. Now, look, Faiz Shakir is Bernie Sanders' campaign manager. Faiz Shakir, he's tough. And I say that in a good way because he does tough commentary. He asks tough questions, right? And he's tough on people that are, doing the absolute wrong thing. He also got punched by Neera Tanden. So you want to talk about, right, the culture around certain politicians. Look at the toxic culture that surrounded Hillary Clinton. You had, before his transformation, you had Peter and Leila Dow that were putting out some of the most vicious, toxic smears against Bernie Sanders. Now, of course, thankfully, Peter Dow is actually the good guy this time around. And he's like, wait a minute, you know what? It turns out the things that I was saying were not true before, and I didn't see it before. Well, now I'm firmly on the side of Bernie Sanders and in this progressive movement. Great, welcome to the club, Chairman Dow. But you also had people like David Brock, who were on Hillary Clinton's team. Before being on Hillary Clinton's team, David Brock was a right-wing hatchet man. And now, he's a supporter of Hillary Clinton. And so, look, that's the kind of toxic people they surround themselves, Neera Tanden and David Brock and the rest. And so, whereas you have people that surround Bernie Sanders that are actually interested in change, and they're a very diverse coalition. And so there's that. But she says, quote, and she continues, it's his online Bernie bros and the relentless attacks on lots of his competitors, particularly the women. And I really hope people are paying attention to that, because it should be worrisome that he has permitted this culture. Not only permitted, he seems to be very much supporting it. There is absolutely no evidence of Bernie Sanders going and supporting attacks against women or anyone else. In fact, just now, Bernie Sanders apologized, and I don't agree with this, by the way. I think it was a wrong move, but he apologized to Joe Biden for one of his surrogates going out and saying that Joe Biden is corrupt. Well, Joe Biden is corrupt. This is why I disagree with that. Joe Biden is known as the senator from NBNA because he was such a friend to credit card companies. He's such a friend to credit card companies, by the way, and lenders, that he decided to do a bankruptcy bill that weakened protections for people who went bankrupt, including not being able to discharge student loans in bankruptcy. The senator from NBNA, not corrupt, ridiculous. Of course he's corrupt. And I always get mad at Bernie Sanders for not being tough enough on these people. And so that's unfortunate that he apologized. So you can't seem to, what Hillary Clinton is saying is not at all correct. It's not at all correct. And so to suggest that he's supporting online attacks is ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that there are no people who are sexist or make vicious attacks on behalf of Bernie Sanders exist. No, there are people like that. But guess what? There are people like that in every campaign. Except in every other campaign, they don't seem to get called out. For example, there's a Never Bernie crowd on Twitter that they say the most hateful things, the donut Twitter. I've seen tweets accusing him of being a fake Jew. That's anti-Semitic. These are people with big audiences as well. And then, you have people that call for him to have a stroke on stage. They call Bernie Sanders supporters awful misogynistic names. You've got the K Hive, right? On Twitter that were saying disastrous things, or at least former members of the K Hive, supporters of other candidates. So don't tell me it's the Bernie bros, right, that drive toxicity online. That's not at all true. And it's funny because so there are these incredibly vicious attacks against Bernie Sanders and his supporters. These people can do that all they want, but as soon as you fight back, especially if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter of color, who's a female, which there are more of actually than white men, well, your identity gets erased. You're called a Bernie bro. This is ridiculous, right? And that's Hillary Clinton. I just wish this Hillary Clinton was more of the same Hillary Clinton back in 2016 when she said this.
I want to thank Bernie Sanders. Bernie, your campaign inspired millions of Americans, particularly the young people who threw their hearts and souls into our primary. You've put economic and social justice issues front and center where they belong. And to all of your supporters here and around the country, I want you to know, I've heard you. Your cause is our cause. Our country needs your ideas, energy, and passion. That is the only way we can turn our progressive platform into real change for America.
How things change. Turns out, I think losing to reality show clown broke her brain. I mean, Jesus. And I guess I don't really blame her for that. Well, look, progressives, of course, have hit back against this. Writer Natalie Shore says Hillary Clinton didn't run for the presidency to benefit anyone but herself. So it makes sense she prioritized personal score settling over siding with Bernie against Trump. Pod Save America host Tommy Vietor also weighed in. Now, the Pod Save America guys are total establishment, right? That's their perspective. And look, I'm not saying that that's a knock. I'm just saying that that's the perspective, right? He said of this, Hillary Clinton, quote, "This is inexcusable. If Bernie wins the nomination, we all need to work our asses off to help him win." Pod Save America guy. Hey, but 100% right. And look, that's what Bernie Sanders supporters did in large part back in 2016. They helped Hillary Clinton. They tried to help Hillary Clinton win the election. In fact, look, most of Bernie Sanders supporters did only about 11 to 12%, right? And this gets cited all the time by Hillary Clinton supporters is like the most horrible thing in the world, right? That voted for Donald Trump. So now that's interesting because 25% of Hillary Clinton supporters in 2008 voted for John McCain, the Republican, over Barack Obama. That's a quarter of her followers. 25% is bigger than 12, right? I just want to make sure I got my math down, okay? So not only did she run an even more brutal primary against Barack Obama, and trust me, that was a nasty primary. much nastier than even 2016, which they act like, no, that's the worst of the worst of the worst. No, it wasn't. No, it's relatively tame compared to what happened between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. So, and one example of that, and this is where the Bernie Bro narrative comes from, is they had a smear, the Clinton campaign had a smear of Obama supporters. They called them sexist Obama boys. Hey, Obama boys, back off. Your sexist attacks against Hillary Clinton. How dare you? Obama boys got recycled into Bernie Bros. Yeah. And now, by the way, those 25% of Clinton supporters that voted for John McCain, what did they call themselves? Pumas. What does that mean? Party unity my ass. Now, that's funny because all you hear now is unity, unity. We must unify the party to fight against Donald Trump. We need unity. Bernie Bros, why don't you do unity with us, you sexist creeps? Why don't you unify and vote with the party? You terrible, misogynistic, horrible, vile people online. Why don't you unify? Well, why don't we unify behind the candidate that is the most likely to beat Donald Trump? And that poll after poll after poll after poll after poll since 2016 is unarguably Bernie Sanders. It's in the numbers. It's in the numbers. Bernie Sanders has polled consistently better against Donald Trump ever since 2016, whereas Hillary Clinton struggled and ultimately lost. You want unity? Bernie Sanders. He is the unity candidate. The biggest divider of the Democratic Party is not Bernie Sanders. It's Hillary Clinton. Because every time she's come out of hiding, she has said the same thing. Bernie Sanders is awful. Such a terrible person. Oh, I can't believe Bernie Sanders is so sexist. How terrible is this guy? I thought you're not supposed to tear down the Democratic candidates in a primary. Look, I think a primary is where you're supposed to distinguish yourself. And you are supposed to fight amongst each other. But Hillary Clinton, and the Democrats, they're like, whenever Bernie Sanders makes a slight critique of somebody else, a competitor in the Democratic Party in the primary, they're like, how dare you attack a fellow Democrat? How dare you? Bernie Sanders, you're dividing the party. By the way, Bernie Sanders is a sexist, misogynist, and a lying snake. What? Bernie Sanders is the dividing one? Get out of here. Get out of here. No, what Hillary Clinton wants to do is to bring us Donald Trump. If Bernie Sanders becomes the nominee, she will not support him. You know what Bernie Sanders did? Bernie Sanders did 39 rallies for Hillary Clinton, enthusiastically endorsed her, said she can win. I urge every one of my supporters to go out and to campaign and to vote for Hillary Clinton, our next president. That's what Bernie Sanders said. Hillary Clinton says, I'm not there yet. Nope. I will not support Bernie Sanders. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Now, there's more responses, but let me just get to Bernie Sanders. All right. So now, when asked about this, what Hillary Clinton had said, Bernie Sanders responded in the most Bernie Sanders way possible. Here's what he said, quote, well, on a good day, my wife likes me, so let's just clear the air on that one. And then afterwards, he went back to talking about income inequality. Look, man, this is a really bad look for Hillary Clinton. And actually a really good look for Bernie Sanders. I think this is only going to help him. I mean, much more than a real endorsement would, which might actually hurt him because of how unpopular she is. So I guess at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders' camp should send a note to Hillary Clinton thanking her for that heartfelt endorsement. We're going to win. Jesus. All right. Anyway, you know what? I'm out of time. That's all the time I got for you guys. Thank you for going on the Nation Meet today. No super chats, unfortunately, but I appreciate you guys watching. So I'm gonna head out, get my stuff done, and we'll come back to. No, not tomorrow. So tomorrow, I have. Okay, so tomorrow, my electricity is going to be turned off just for the day, just for a few hours. But during that time, I will not be able to do show prep. So I don't know if there's going to be a show today. There might be some clips. I'm going to work on that and at least try to get something out for you guys tomorrow. But we'll see how that goes. But Thursday we'll be back on track as normal. So thank you guys for watching. Please like and share the stream. Please like and share the clips. All that stuff. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. See you guys later.
Mike Pounds.
Please clap. You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.